This is why I decided to sell my £1 million property portfolio. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Josh, the short lease specialist. This channel is all about property investment, specifically with a focus on short leases. That's the area that I've initially fell into, but then over time really honed out a niche to the point where not only am I investing it, I also run a business focused on short lease flats as well. If you've got any questions on short leases, then follow along. I might answer them, or feel free to drop things in the comments below if there's videos or topics you'd like me to cover in the future. But in this one, I'm going to talk about why I sold my £1 million portfolio. If you want to know how we built the portfolio, then go back one or two videos that was uploaded recently. But this is really about a change in direction from my property investing. And I'll go through it maybe step by step here. First off, it took a while to grow. £1 million portfolio in North London, the area I was investing in, was actually only 3 flats. So when I'm talking about selling all of it, it's not like I've sold 20 properties here. It's changing the tact on 3. The values are still add up the same. It still gives us a decent amount of equity out once we've completed the sale and paid the taxes and such like. But it's not an enormous amount of properties. It's just a pretty healthy property value. So property 1 actually wasn't a sale, but what I did do is convert it into my residential. So initially bought it as a buy-to-let. Always had in the back of my mind that it was a flat I'd like to live in. At the time was living with my girlfriend's parents. That's what allowed us in the first place to save and buy our first property, and then helped us get the other 2 along the way. But a few years in, that was reaching the end of its shelf life, shall we say. So getting out, getting our own space, converting that flat into a residential wasn't a sale. We did sell it later and we moved on to our house and our next, well, that was a project as well, actually. But when we moved on to our next house, the other 2 had been buy-to-lets for a few years, and it reached that time to sell it. One, the first property we bought it for 192,000. We sold it for around 330. An excellent price, honestly, more than what I was expecting at the time when it went on the market. We were selling in a very buoyant market. We knew that prices were high at that time and decided to take advantage of that and realize some of the cash before, in my mind, what was going to happen, prices would start to tail off. So we'd been in a high growth area in North London. It was Enfield. All 3 flats were concentrated in that same area as well. And the capital growth had kind of stalled. The market was very good at that time when we sold it for 330, but just to really hammer home that point, we sold it for 330. A couple of years later, the people that bought it, nice first-time buyer couple, it was a nice first-time buyer flat for them to live in. They wanted to sell up and move on to a house. They ended up selling for 310. So they made, or around 310, they made roughly a 20k loss over 2 years. If we'd kept hold of that property, that would have been a loss for us as well, because the monthly rent wasn't making up that difference. So cashing out when the market is high, knowing that you're not going to be able to remortgage in the future, or knowing, or not knowing, because you can't ever know in the market, but suspecting that values weren't going to maintain where they were, meant we avoided putting more money in at refinance if the bank says, well, we're not going to lend as much this time, or ultimately making a loss if we then decided to sell it a couple of years later. Not a loss because we bought it for much less, but not as much as we could have done. So property values had stalled. The rent was okay. We're getting a few £100s a month. That definitely went down quite well. But it was time to move the money into something else. Same reason for property number 2, but we got the timing of it worse there. So that initially we bought for just over 200,000. We had it refinanced during ownership for around 310, or valued at 310 at refinance. So we'd done really well on property values going up, but mistimed the sale. And that ended up selling for around 280. So there, where we'd avoided a 20k loss on the first one, we lost out on maybe 30,000 on the second one. The reason I wanted to sell even at that time, was because I wanted to go into flipping projects. The values had stalled, like I said. There wasn't much benefit in keeping hold of those properties, because even looking back now, a few years later, they're still about the same. So the market had just gone flat there. It wasn't going up anymore, which wasn't going to allow us to then refinance, pull out more money in the future, go again into the next property. And this is where I probably made the biggest mistake of my property journey. Was at the time, I wasn't formally educated. I don't think you need formal education in property, but you do need to know things that you could be missing out on. And I was missing out on investor finance. The reality was I could have kept those properties. They could have kept bringing in the monthly rent, even if we couldn't remortgage in the future to grow that cash pot to go and buy the next one. Instead, I thought, okay, I need to sell them in order to realize that cash. What could have been a better option, this isn't financial advice, it's just what would have been better for me at the time, would instead have been to go and raise investor finance, partner up with someone, collaborate with someone in order to be able to keep buying properties. It was, like I say, a mistake at the time, but not the worst of it. We've still made money off those sales since by going into flip projects. And that's what I'll talk maybe a bit more about in the next video. Our first flip after selling those properties, the investment, the outcome, the hold, and the profit we made. If you're interested in hearing more about that, then subscribe and follow along. If you're interested in knowing maybe what your options could be, do you need to sell your properties? Could you look at investor finance? Are there other ways to grow your portfolio? Then absolutely please feel free to get in touch. You can comment down below, or my contact details will be in the description as well, or in my bio. And if you're interested in more videos, then subscribe and follow along. We'll see you soon.